folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about voting patterns and how, if the voting age was changed or certain categories of voters were restricted or others expanded, or whatever the case may be, but changing the mix of voting, then how much this would affect the type of government we had or have and will get. So I just want to talk about what we assume universal franchise, everyone gets the vote, as being the standard benchmark for government, but it actually isn't so. The universal franchise, certainly in the West, really only occurred sort of in the 1920s onwards, and the idea of 18-year-olds being able to vote really only came in the 1960s and 70s. So the structure, if you like, of the democratic process, that is, in who is franchised, who has the right to vote, is about 50 years old. It's only been around in overall historical terms. It hasn't been around for very long. Now, I guess there are a few things that changed. The high watermark of democracy, say a developed organic democracy as it developed in, say, Britain, was in the sort of the 1880s, I suppose, where 65% of men over the age of 21 had the right to vote, and 15% of women, and these were mainly women over the age of 30, had the right to vote. So that was kind of I guess that had the maximum representation of those with skin in the game, maximum concern about society. So these were people with sort of full-time jobs or inherited wealth or business owners, that sort of thing. So there's never many wealthy people in a society, but they had the franchise, and then what you would call the developing middle class. And again, I'm using Britain as the reference point here, and this is during the time of, say, the prime ministership of William Gladstone and around that time. Now, what changed this was they were nearly all family men and women, for example, who were voting. But what changed this was the First World War. Now, that required the government to intrude in every facet of life and to organise the economy, to organise society, and so on. And the government never actually has retreated from that fully. It retreated somewhat. But then there was the Depression and the Second World War, and that kept the government in and then subsequent wars like the Vietnam War and so on, that kept the government sort of involved in the micromanagement of the economy and the society and what people should and shouldn't do. And this was reflected in the franchise. So the idea was that if you were going to put your life on the line in the mass mobilization of the First World War, women were to go to work and work full-time in, say, munitions factories. So there's a need for the people to be on side as part of the war effort. The perception was that all wars would be wars of mass mobilization. The First World War was the first war that, for example, had use of machine guns and things like that, which, by the way, drastically changed how wars were fought. So in return in the 1920s and the rising labor movement, that sort of thing, and the Bolshevik Revolution creating a sense of we better placate these people on the left. Then the men were given the vote. I think it was only over the age of 21. Some countries over the age of 23 for men. And then the women were given the vote, later on. And it became universal franchise. So then come the Vietnam War, or those times around there, because it was young 18-year-olds that were being called up and drafted. it wasn't mass mobilisation. Mass mobilisation, it was selective mobilisation, and they were targeting young men, between 18, 19 years old. And so it became, well, if we're getting these young men to put their lives on the line, then we should reduce the voting age to 18, so these young men can have a say in. And this had the wars had the effect of radicalising sections of society, particularly the college kids. But that was where the vote then became to 18. Then it was in the interests of equity and equality. Well, we should give young women the vote as well. So the voting age for women went down from 23 or 21 down to 18, and then you had universal franchise for anyone 18 and over, and that's how that happened. But again, it's fairly recent now. Where there was a sort of a working class divide, the Democrats in the United States, who are very much in bed with organised labour, or the Labor Party in Britain. When it was run along strictly class lines, and one representing the workers and the Republicans representing the sort of the wider economy and the aspirational classes, then you had typically well, I wouldn't say an even split necessarily, but it was a reasonably shared power arrangement, in the sense that each of these parties pursued different policies. The left was more ideological in working class, representing the working class and the worker and the downtrodden, that sort of thing. But and the Republicans, or the Conservatives as they were in Britain, representing wider, again, an aspirational class. This all changed. Really, with the vote, with the reducing the voting age to 18, that was really where the big change occurred, and where the Democrat Party, the Labor Party in Britain, they began to decouple themselves from the working class and instead represent what they perceived as, in a very Marxist sort of structural sense, but represent the minority classes as they perceived them. So it became very boutique and rather cynical, I think, in pursuing the votes of people that would, again, the minorities. So now this was very much how the communists went about it. They would so we're representing the downtrodden, we're representing women, and Joseph Stalin, the murderous dictator of the Soviet Union, would attend international women's conferences saying, "Hey, you go, girl, you go, girl, you get out of that kitchen, don't you be downtrodden by those evil men." When in the same time he was signing hundreds of death warrants per day, people that had been arbitrarily arrested and had no geolegal process. A murderous fucking dictator who's running around saying that he supports women's rights. That's the cynicism and the duplicity and the double standards of these ideological fanatics and power mad dictators. So, but anyway, coming back to I was quite surprised just recently, and I made a quick note actually, so I'll quote the numbers of the voting patterns, or alleged. Depends on whose numbers you're looking at, by the way, here. But young women, so under the age of 25, vote for leftist globalist parties on a 3-to-1 ratio. So for every 4 women voters, 3 of them young women, are voting for the leftist globalist party. So we can see straight away, without the women's vote, the Democrats would really struggle to win an election unless they change their policies. This assumes on their current policies as goons and stooges for the globalists. Now with young men, it's a little bit, it's 1.1 to 1 in favour of the globalists. So it's almost an even split amongst young men. Again, this is under the age of 25. Now, as you get younger, again, say just breaking out the 18 to 21, so this is kids leaving high school and doing undergraduate degrees in college and that type of thing, then the ratio of women there is 3.2 to 1. Sorry, both classes, 3.2 to 1. That's young men and women. So again, college kids overwhelmingly vote for their own destruction through the voting for pro-globalist parties. Now, if we just look at just there's a few things to sort of think about here. If the voting age was changed to say 23, and there could be exceptions for people serving in say frontline roles in the military or firefighters who run into the burning building to save the baby and that sort of thing. There should be exemptions, I think, for those type of things. But just if you change the voting age to 23, and assuming again the current policies exist, the leftist globalist, the Democrat Party, would win 1 in every 7 elections. So they'd be, very, very much a wilderness type party or close to it. Now that's just changing the voting age to 23. Now that shows you how the 18 to 23 range of voters, particularly young women, is favouring the Democrat situation, which is why they pitch at them so hard. They run around talking about pro-abortion policies because it's one of the bigger concerns of women in that age group. Now, if you changed it to, say, you moved in the voting age, I've crunched the numbers here, you moved the voting age to 25. So you can only vote if you're 25 years old and above. And again, exceptions for frontline military personnel and so on. Then, the leftists would win, like according to the calculations here, say 1 in every 17, 18 elections. So the chances of them winning an election would be so rare as to it would be a shock when they did. Now, if you took single women, young women and single women are also very much voting for their own demise. We welcome illiterate black peasants as migrants, and isn't that wonderful? And we're culturally enriched. But if you took if only married women, for example, if only married women with children could vote, then again, it would be 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 elections the leftist parties would win. So really, they're reducing the voting age to 18 really was brought in the demise of the modern Western state. If the voting age had been held at 21, or again in some places 23. Now, it wasn't simply just that set the scene. Now, what we find with the demise of any civilization or country or region is that the conditions were created for the demise, and then the kill shot sort of came in from left field in a consequences type arrangement that no one really saw coming. So the dropping the voting age, in itself wasn't what did it. What did it was insisting that the majority of kids should go through college, should get a college degree, then creating the dumbed down courses, and then allowing the radicalization of the kids through the college system. And so you've got to, and through high school. Remember, again, I've mentioned this sort of many times, that out of say 300, like I say, the school I'm in, there's 250. This is a high school, 250, 300 kids approximately in each year. So the school's got 1,500 to 1,800 kids across six of their senior, or 6 of the high school years. Now, so there's, we'll say 100, just to make round numbers to make it easy. Say there's 100 each year. Now, come the third year of high school, when the kids are sort of turning 14, 15, or 14 years and 6 months and 15, they're within that 6-month window. The school comes along and says, look, if you're not doing well, if you're not passing your exams, or you're a disinterested or troublemaking student, they would effectively throw you out. They sort of, you're wasting your time, but you go and get a job. So there was kids there that, so it would fall, say, from 100 kids in first year, 100 kids in second year, and then the end of the third year, 30 to 35, if not 40 of the kids were chopped out. Those were the amount of students that just weren't making it. And I remember those kids. They were getting things like 5% in the exam. I remember kids were so dumb they would get 0% in the exam. I mean, can you believe, is that even possible? So so that's the third year is big. Now at the end of the fourth year of high school, there was like the junior high school certificate type thing, and you would then graduate to the senior high school, and they would have another clearing out. So there were a lot of kids. So now but by the time you get to the senior 2 years of high school, it's less than half the kids that started in first year are still in. They have another clearing out in year 11 of high school, and again, if you're not passing the tests, you're out. Or you don't get thrown out, but they say, look, don't waste your time. You're just not that good a student. And they had a fallback position where they would call someone who passed, just managed to pass the majority of their subjects. They would call it a well-rounded education, I think was the term they used at the time. But they would, even then, they'd sort of, teachers and careers advisors, whatever they call them, careers counsellors, I think they call them, would say, look, Jimmy Jack or Billy Bob, that really, look, out of your 7 subjects, you passed 4, but only just, is this really a place where you want to be? Why don't you go and get a job? So they'd still have that conversation with the kids. Some kids did decide on the strength of that to go. Others took exception to it or decided that they were going to knuckle down and work harder at studying and so on. And then you had the amount of kids that would graduate to go to university. So out of the 100 kids that began high school in year 1, maybe 3 go through to university. So that was the structure. Now it's different. Out of the 100 kids that start high school, nearly all of them go through to senior high school, and around 60 of them end up going to university. So that just shows you how dumbed down it is. So you get these really dumb, low IQ kids that are hopelessly radicalized, and told that the society they live in is terrible and it's evil and it's bad, compared to what? That's never said. But and so they've got these radicalized kids now. When you look at that, they're running around now. The radicalized kids are running around in the tens of millions, and they overwhelmingly vote for pro-globalist parties. Let's tear everything down, let's burn everything down type attitudes. And these are the ones that have no regard for the rule of law or due legal process. They think Antifa burning down buildings and murdering people is good. It's wow. That's so wonderful. But stopping illegal immigrants, illegal illiterate peasant immigrants at the border, that's the most evil thing that could be conceived. That's how insane these people are. But they're voting and voting in the tens of millions. So a whole lot of things converge: the reduction of the voting age, the radicalization that came from the Vietnam War about people getting conscripted, which was an issue in Australia as much as it was in the United States, by the way. I remember that as I was a primary school kid, I think, when I first saw that. But this combination of forces, the radicalization of kids going to universities, being radicalized through high school, the education system overall becoming an indoctrination machine. All these things combine to pervert democracy, and pervert it has. So you just look at changing the voting age and moving the voting age around, or restricting the voting age, or so anyone you can't vote if you're still at school. These sorts of things. There could be all sorts of methods that are used to bring sanity back into the democratic process. Because at the moment, the democratic process has been rendered utterly dysfunctional by, and we saw that in the 2020 presidential election, just how easily it could be corrupted, how many people were prepared to assist, aid and abet in that corruption and perversion and subversion. It's astonishing. It's hard to believe. Democrat governors and attorneys general and electoral commissioners and so on were so easily turned to corruption. I can barely get my head around it, but there you go. So if we want to return to a democratic process, the means is there, but either something has to happen. The voting age has to increase, because these kids that would have gone out and got a job, in a saner world, are now again, tens of millions of them have been radicalised through the education system, particularly through senior high school and college, and this has created effectively a fifth column, if you like, determined to destroy the very democracy they're benefiting from, or think they're benefiting from. So these are the things. So if the voting age was changed to 21 or 23, or assuming you're out of college, or you have to have an income, above a certain level, or you have to something that isn't easy to manipulate and counter-infiltrate by globalist goons and activists, because you can put sensible things in place, but it assumes everybody operating around it is acting in good faith. But in reality, the globalists will never act in good faith. They will subvert everything they touch. So something needs to be put into place that is very resistant to globalist subversion. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.